Welcome to the Dr. Ed Show. I'm Dr. Edmund Sulkowski. You know, you can always hear me live every Saturday morning on AM 1250 The Answer at 9 o'clock on my radio show, the Dr. Ed Show, where our guest today has been a frequent guest. I always look forward to Dr. Rebecca Plute coming on. Her knowledge in medicine is extraordinary, but to me, her attitude is even more impressive because she's here to help you, not to dictate to you what you need. So let's welcome Dr. Rebecca Plute. Dr. Plute, welcome.
So good to see you. So good to see you.
It's always good to see you. You know, you've been involved in medicine for a long time, and I think you've transitioned in your approach to medicine. So I would like our audience to kind of understand your background. First of all, getting into the medical profession takes an extraordinary commitment, and I don't think a lot of people understand what you go through, what you give up in getting that education. What motivated you to become a physician?
That's such a great question. I love the academics. I love the medicine part of it, but I really felt this was my calling. I felt I was created, meant to do this, and I had the aptitude, and it was exciting for me to develop that aptitude and engage with people and see the result where I could really make a difference in people's health.
So when you were growing up, you said, I'm going to go into medicine.
No, it wasn't. I grew up on a farm, and I, had a lot of other great experiences and stuff. I don't think I was that forward focused. I first considered it when I was a teenager. I really didn't have the self-confidence. I had a lot of kind of negative thinking where I'm like, oh, that's too hard, that's too much. Maybe I'm not emotionally strong enough and everything to do that. And it really wasn't until I started to experience increasing amounts of academic success, especially at the college level, when I really I could do anything, right? And I was sitting there in a calculus class with...
Oh, that's no fun.
in a study group, but it was fun. Okay, that's a thing.
You're an exception to that rule. I never was fond of calculus.
And there's these guys, and it's Calc 2 level, and I'm just taking Calc 2 because I had AP Calc in high school, and I just wanted to finish. Well, I happened to have a great teacher, so it was actually really good.
And that makes a big difference.
Yeah, I had a great teacher, a mentor. So I'm teaching these, aerospace engineering majors and pre-med majors how to do this stuff. And I'm getting better scores than them on the test. And I'm like, well, I could be an aerospace engineer or a doctor, right? And I'm like, I want to be a doctor. So, and it just snowballed from there.
So growing up on a farm, you worked with animals.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of think that brings you tighter because you learn to react to the emotions of the animals, because animals have emotions. People don't realize that as well.
Yeah, and just like people, they have vibes, they have nonverbal cues. I still have a couple little sheep at home, and yeah, you can kind of tell, hey, this one doesn't feel good today, right? This one seems a little nervous today, right? You look, you see those, and it becomes almost a second nature to you, where something's wrong, and then you start to look at the details to...
Which you can transcribe and apply that with your patients as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I know with my own experience in my practice, you can sometimes, when somebody you walk into the room and your patient's sitting in their chair, and you have a sense of something going on before you even say good morning or good afternoon.
Yeah, and for me, conventional medicine, we'll talk a little bit about my concierge practice, when I'm seeing 1,000 different people in a year is a little bit different than my more intimate practice, because it adds that layer that if I see somebody and I know how they usually look and how they usually walk and they interact, and something's different that really cues me in right away to a different level and depth. And
you're locally grown.
Yes.
So you went away different areas throughout your career, but then you came back to Western Pennsylvania, good old Canonsburg area, and I think that says a lot, because I did the same thing. But you always end up coming back to your roots, I think.
Mm-hmm. Especially in Western Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
It's a draw.
and I interact with so many people that have gone away. They go to Florida, Arizona, California, wherever, but then they end up coming back.
Yeah.
Well, now we complain about the weather often because we got used to that nice weather in these other places. But there's still, this is a special area. It really is.
It
If
really
the weather was
is.
better, I'd really like it here.
And I've learned to just embrace the weather.
Yeah.
I do. One of my personal philosophies is you got what you got today.
Yeah, that's true.
If you can find something good in it, if it's a rainy, gray day, good. The trees needed some water today. If it's a hot, sunny day, good, because I was needing a little lift, right? If it's a frozen winter day, find some beauty in it. The weather is one thing we really can't change.
You can't change it.
So the only thing we can change about the weather is our viewpoint on it.
And that's absolutely the case.
Yeah. So pick something that makes you happy.
Easier said than done, but
it's a practice thing.
It is.
It's a practice thing.
So where did you go to medical school?
Medical College of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia.
Which is Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a really
which
good
is now
school.
Drexel University.
Yeah, I know the area well. So that was probably a big change going from this area to Philadelphia, because I lived in Philadelphia for a year, and it's a different culture altogether.
Oh, it sure is.
Yeah, it's more like New York, and we're more, central United States, more Midwest.
Yeah, and but I gravitated towards the little niches, right? You can always find a good niche. So there was like Wissahickon Park, which was a lot of natural beauty, and I would take the dog and go on big hikes at Wissahickon Park. And there was Manioc, which had like great farmers market and stuff like that. So, I found the things in the city that were a little bit like home, and that made it an enjoyable 4 years.
And there'd be the rowers on the Schuylkill.
Oh, yeah.
Rowing every morning.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, I used to love to go through Little Italy and go to all the shops and the food places through there. Philadelphia is interesting sometimes.
It has a lot of different stuff.
Yeah, a lot of history.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, my father before he became a principal, was a history English teacher, and he would always take us to Philadelphia to see the historic sites and so forth.
Okay.
So, you learn a lot in Philadelphia, on either side of that.
It's the city of brotherly love.
There's some rough areas that you can't walk down the streets.
Right, right. And
so.
I think in addition to all the nice cultural things, right, it also does teach you an appreciation for the human condition and some of the things we struggle with as people, and how these things are kind of contagious and pass through generations and quickly through time.
So when you graduated from school, your first position as a physician was where?
Well, the first thing I did was residency.
At University Hospital in
No, I went to a community hospital, Easton Hospital.
Okay, which is north?
That's where the original Crayola factor was.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's northeast Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I've been all over Pennsylvania, right? So I was on the Allentown, Bethlehem, Easton access, Lehigh Valley area.
Yes.
I did a year of surgical, and then after surgical, I went into family practice. And so that's where I did. And then when I finished my family practice, I came home to Washington County and joined Centerville Clinics and practiced there until 2015.
So you practiced medicine in a private practice or in a hospital-owned facility?
A minor's clinic that grew into Centerville Clinics is a large federally qualified health center that serves a wide range of population, and including the uninsured and the underinsured, and Medicaid, Medicare, commercial insurances. So really a very complete, eclectic population.
Yeah, that's giving you a broad spectrum of patients and seeing different ailments and social lifestyles and everything. Yeah. So now you practice in Canonsburg, and you're a concierge physician. Would you please define that for us? Because that's kind of interesting.
It is, and I love this way of practicing. So while I was in the community health center, which is a high volume of patients, and you're learning a lot and you're doing a lot, there was an office that was a little more remote in Greene County that was kind of underdeveloped and struggling, and my administrators asked me to go there and build up the practice. Well, while I was building up the practice, it wasn't very busy, right? So I took the time and really started to spend time with my patients and get to know them. And one of the things in conventional medicine, when you're trying to push people through, because that's what the system does, you don't get time to know people, and I really like people, I do. And then the system tells you, well, their sugars aren't good because they're not compliant with their medicines. But you've never really took time to find out what's going on with them metabolically, what's going on in their social fabric and their personal life, and what kind of maybe things are their unique learning styles that'll help them better manage what's going on in their body. Like, you just can't have the time in conventional practice. So as I built the practice up, right, I got to explore this part of medicine, which is so much more rewarding than just rushing people through.
See, I think that, there was a time when there was that establishment that you had between your medical provider and the patient, where the medical provider knew you.
Yeah, it's called a relationship.
Yeah, knew your family, knew
Yeah.
Everything of, you know, what you were doing, how you worked, where everything, where you went to school. And then it's transitioned to hospitals owning the practice, basically owning how the physician practices.
Right.
And then you have insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies owning the hospitals. They're all intertwined and invested in each other and controlling. And then insurance companies step in and they dictate, and this happens all the time, they dictate how you can practice.
Yeah.
And they're about the numbers. It's always about the numbers with them.
Yeah.
So a physician, you can see the physician, you get 5 minutes with a physician. Well, that physician doesn't know you in 5 minutes, you know, in my opinion. Or you don't even sometimes get a chance to see the physician, you're seeing a nurse practitioner. And that's not the type of relationship that I know that I want. And it's a hard thing to find if you have a physician that can actually spend time to get to know you.
Yeah, because I like to collaborate, I like to partner with people, I like to come alongside them and help them be successful in solving their own problems. I don't like that, well, I have the answer, you do this, and everything will be great.
The answer is, I got a pill for this.
Yeah, I got a pill for it. Because I don't think a pill for this or a procedure for this is the answer as often as we wish, right? And I think a lot of it actually has to do with people's thinking and how they're feeling, you know. And we're in the midst of probably one of the worst mental health crises in humanity, at least the one that's on historical record.
So, that situation, and I would agree with you because I see this as well, is that stress causing that?
Well, I mean, if you think about it from a broad historical standpoint, you know, probably during the bubonic plague, there was a little more actual stress in the world, right? As far as like, we have good temperatures, we're not gonna starve to death. Like, we have so many social services available and so many amenities. As a human being, we're not under the bodily threat from the external environment, right? We are kind of like only, like our last great frontier is how do we deal with the enemy within? And this already started to happen in the greatness of civilization. When we talk about Maimonides, that physician that in 1200 AD said only 1 death in 1,000 is due to natural causes, the other 999 irrational living. And there's such a powerful mind-body connection that if we're not managing our thoughts and we don't have our emotions organized and those things start to turn against us and we become inflamed in our head, inevitably we will become inflamed in our body. So when some people talk about behavioral health, they're focusing on, well, you're eating the wrong things or you're drinking too much alcohol or you're smoking, and that's the behavioral health we have to focus on. But I think even deeper, even beyond that, is the behavioral health that has to do with how do I conceive of the world, my place, and my future in it, and how is that doing my body?
So what you're saying, I think, is you can blame smoking and poor quality food or bad food, which there's a lot of, or alcohol, whatever, as the cause of an issue, which granted, they are.
Yeah, that's for real.
But you want to look at the root cause of why you're smoking, why you're eating the bad food, or why you're drinking.
Right.
Yeah.
What is it that your mind is looking for?
What's missing?
Yeah.
What's lacking? Something like that. And so you're saying these people are turning to alcohol because there's a void in their life somewhere else.
Right. Yeah. Or the bad food is just available, but if your mind is fully developed, and there's an analogy here, right? if your mind is like a pot of boiling water, it's all over the place. It's disorganized, it's stressful in a way, right? If you can calm your mind, smooth it like glass, and be reflective, you can see things more clearly. So it's almost like if you encounter the Twinkie and it's sitting next to an apple, and you look at it, if your mind is boiling, you just grab what's easy and you don't really think about it, and it becomes a habit and it just becomes part of the boil. Whereas if you're clearer thinking, you're like, wait a minute, which one of these will serve me better? Which one of these will I ultimately enjoy both in the moment and in my life longer?
See, it's interesting because that Twinkie or that cake or that bowl of ice cream full of sugar, and we know sugar has issues on our body. It's given. Even natural sugar, if taken improperly, can have the same issue. But we know it's the same receptor sites as cocaine.
Yeah.
And so what you're doing is getting that immediate gratification, and it's this immediate buzz.
Yeah, it can be very addicted.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of food addiction
And then
issues.
you add the easy inconvenience of it, just unwrapping something and eating it. It's no wonder why people have problems.
Yeah.
You know. So how do you go about then with it? We're talking about mental health here a little bit. How do you go about squelching that attitude to get that instant quick fix and find out what's missing that's making you want to go do that?
Well, I think you have to, start looking at the influences in your life, right? Because we all have incredibly powerful minds. We have unbelievable ability to discern things and decide things. And when our mind is functioning best and our mind is well organized, right, we're actually going to be empowered to make the best decisions, and it's not going to be so much of a struggle to make a decision. A lot of times people are like, I want to quit drinking, I know it's bad for me. But if their mind is all disorganized and they have a lot of different thoughts and a lot of different influences, and they're anxious or they're depressed or they're worried about the future, that stuff is exhausting them, so it's harder to change and make a new healthy habit, right? So the first thing to do is figure out, where are these influences coming from? What is actually in my life and getting processed by my mind that's junking it up in the first place?
So everybody gets up, and I have a lot of conversations with a lot of people throughout the day, and they talk about what's going on in the news, and I look at them and I say, I don't even listen to the news. And they look at me funny and I say, why do I want to get up in the morning, turn on that TV or whatever, and start hearing about all these bad things that are going on that they just want to keep focusing on? They don't talk about the good things that are going on.
Well, there's a reason for that, right? The news doesn't function in our current day society to give you good information about what's happening, because it doesn't get paid to give you good information about what's going on. Like earlier in the media history, I remember when I was 1970s, I could watch the weather report and it would say which days were going to be sunny and which days were going to be rain. And it might even give you a little bit of interesting information, like there's cool, dry air coming down from the Canadian jet stream, and there's some warm, moist coming up from the Gulf. And when these fronts meet, we're going to get some mixed precipitation and then partly sunny skies and clearing for the weekend. Back to you, Dan. Now you have the weather report. Now we have a cyclone bomb. And these fronts are exploding over the East Coast. Why do they do that? Because it grabs our attention. We get a little nugget. We get a little excited. We get a little nervous. Or, right, the latest political thing. It's, he's a fascist. She's a communist, right? We're like, what? I remember something from history class like, communism isn't good. Communism could be deadly. I better find out what's going on, right? And that helps you stay tuned in. And that helps you remember that there's something that you got to follow up and stay tuned again tomorrow. And that increases ratings, or in the internet world, clicks, right? And then you have to follow up on it, right? Because you need to know what's going on, because it sounds like a big deal. And that sells commercial slots. So, as human beings, part of our social structure is, what can I do to grab some attention? But the fallout from being constantly stimulated with this dramatic language, dramatic colors, dramatic music, is that the drama's all around you all the time. And then it's throwing everything out of proportion in how you process the rest of your day.
So I noticed a big change, and I was an early adapter.
Mm-hmm.
I actually stood in line for 6 hours for the first iPhone, and I
Okay.
don't stand in line for anything.
Good for you.
I never did it again after that, but I had to have that first iPhone.
That is an awesome piece of history.
Yeah, I still have that iPhone, actually. The other ones I've had, I must have had every generation since.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I get rid of, but I still have that first one. But I'm not addicted to it. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't get up in the morning and go, oh, who's this email from? Who's this text
Yeah.
from? You know, my first thing in the morning when I get up is to go make my cup of coffee,
Mm-hmm.
which has multi-purposes for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I put earbuds in,
Mm-hmm.
and I turn on some music.
Mm-hmm.
And I start my day with music that I'm enjoying.
Mm-hmm.
Not always the same music every day. It depends on, you know, what my attitude, morning attitude is and what I want to hear. And then I do some oil painting, so I'll go and little paint. So I start off my day in an enjoyable relaxation.
Right.
Because I know what's ahead of me. I'm seeing 20 to 30 patients that day.
Mm-hmm.
Most everybody's seeing me because they have a problem I have to resolve for them. And it's a lot of pressure and a lot of stress.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't walk into my office all stressed out.
Yeah.
Is that in part what you're talking about?
Mm-hmm.
So what are some ways that people can do that other than what I do, listen to music? And I always say, start your day off with a nice tune in your head. What are some of the things people can do to set their mindset to get through the stress of a regular day?
So one of the most peace-inducing things that people can do is to change their perspective, to look at things differently, right? And when you're doing that, you're learning. And learning of all the things out there, learning and growing, whether it's in a personal relationship, a spiritual sense, an academic sense, a professional sense, learning new things and getting satisfying thoughts and results is one of the most powerful ways to combat your risk for mental illness and mental disturbances and what the psychiatric world calls disorders and stuff like that. So being ever learning is great, you know. So I would say even things that seem not so good, like the media and the drama, just learning to look at through a different lens, right? Instead of being influenced like that, start to say, how is this trying to manipulate me? How is
that's
this
what it's-
trying? It is
that's
a
what it-
manipulation,
yes.
right? And there could be manipulations. Somebody's goal might get you to buy their drug. Somebody's goal might be able to focus on me and intention so I can get my clicks up, so I can sell more commercials to, you know, the YouTube channel or whatever, so I'm worth more. It might be so that you vote for this politician so that, you know, this politician can keep his power. You know, there could be any reason, and I think that one of the most refreshing ways that you can look at all the social media and the TV media and the radio media around you is to just start to play a little intellectual game, like, what are they trying to get me to do? What are they trying to get me to communicate to the people in my circle to get them hooked in too? Because this, you know, there's a fascinating, wonderful things about people is that we can have social contagion. You know, now social contagion, it can be an incredibly wonderful force in humanity, right? Like you get people doing the right thing and it's catching on and, you know, they're treating each other well and they're, you know, whether it's space exploration or get the railroad across the country, people are like, yeah, we want to do this, we get this on board. And this is when you can see incredible growths in, you know, art and the improvement of the condition. But that social condition's downside is this is also how you can spread fear, how you can spread panic, how you can topple governments that were probably making good progress on their own. You know, so social contagion is a very, very powerful thing we have to be aware of.
So that very thing was used when COVID-19 virus was let out or given to us, and they used fear. So fear is a big selling factor in getting people to manipulate people to do what you want them to do.
Yeah, and it's short-sighted. So in medicine, right, like 25 years ago when I'm training in medicine, you know, the educational model is you gotta like tell people like if they don't get their sugar under control, they're gonna get dialysis and they're gonna have the heart attack and they're gonna have the stroke and they're gonna have the amputations. And you would think that will be a good motivation to keep the sugar. But it turns out to be a short-sighted thing.
Yeah.
If you can get people more to focus on what's important to them and what they need to be capable to be able to do, you actually get much better health behaviors. You get them in a much better health state. You get them having the endurance to make the changes they need to make, because fear is never enduring. And then there's a retaliatory phenomenon. We saw that. So, you know, people watching the media, and there's all this fear going on and stuff like that, and some people are like, gathered with that, and maybe most people for the first few months of the lockdown, or you know, like that. And then all of a sudden you start to get the skeptics, you know, and then you get the vaccine coming out, and the extreme form of the skeptics are like, they're putting microchips in there. Now, we know they weren't putting microchips in there. We do know that there wasn't enough research done ahead of time to figure out what the risks and the benefits were.
I just read a study yesterday, and it's micro tears in patients that have died from heart conditions from the vaccine, after getting the vaccine.
Wow.
Micro tears in the heart.
Wow,
So,
you were telling me about that earlier
yeah,
this
it's
morning. I
kind of,
haven't read that yet.
So they used fear, and even made the practitioners to be fearful to speak against all of this, when none of it was, you know, my person I can't stomach, Dr. Fauci, call him Dr. Falsey, who implemented this fear factor and took it to the 10th degree and got everybody compliant.
But not everybody.
Not everybody. I will agree to that. All right.
Clearly not you.
But a lot of people. You know,
right.
My head's wrapped up into a lot of this stuff probably more than the average person is, because I see it from my medical training side, and I see it from a whole other aspect.
Yeah.
And you know, I have discernment, which I'm fortunate that I have that. And but I don't want to focus on the vaccine at all. But it's just an example of how fear was used against us.
Right. And what we saw is, again, the belief is this would, you know, I feel like most of the people involved in that, I mean, there were a lot of financial gains and stuff, but a lot of people were trying to do the right thing, at least, you know, people that got caught up in it. But it got, because fear inevitably, and this is the danger, and I don't care if you talk to Gandhi or Jesus or Yoda, whoever you like. All three of them.
My favorite, Yoda.
Yeah, Yoda's your favorite?
No.
All three of them warn that fear is a root cause of evil, because fear leads to anger, right? As Yoda says, and anger leads to hatred, and hatred leads to suffering. So the problem when you motivate people with fear is, sooner or later, you're gonna get frustration and anger. And now you've really got, remember we talked about the clear mind, the clear lake of water is functioning best because you can think rationally. But now you've really got things boiling, and somebody's going to get hurt or burned.
You know, we're at our first break, Dr. Plute, and I think the force is with us. We're here with Dr. Rebecca Plute. We're going to take our first break, and Dr. Plute is founder of Paragon Personal Health Care. In fact, just add a com to that .com, and you can go to our website. We'll be back. Welcome back to the Dr. Ed Show. I'm Dr. Edmund Sulkowski, and we're here with Dr. Rebecca Plute of Paragon Personal Health Care. And our first segment was absolutely fascinating to me, because Dr. Plute comes from a different perspective, and I think I'm going to put her on the spot here. She, of course, doesn't know I'm going to ask this. But I think she sees things a little bit differently for a number of reasons, but one of them is because she's raised a large family. You have how many children?
7.
7. So that's way larger than the average 2.1 or 1.2, whatever it is these days. So you've in raising children and that large-sized family plus animals that you've had, I know you have dogs and sheep and so you have an active personal life as a mom.
Mm-hmm.
How does that influence you in your life?
I think it kind of all just rolls together. I love being a mom. My youngest is 17 now. And, that was a very exciting time in my life. I love seeing them, all kind of pursue different careers and trajectories. And I love that part of it too. I think I'm a very consistent person through the realms. I feel, for the most part, I enjoy a lot of success at whatever I put my hand to. I'm a very spiritual person. When people say 7 is a large family, I'm like, it's a large family in today's culture, but if you look at the history of the world, it's not really that big of a family, right? So I remember at one time my mother-in-law says to me, I had 4 little boys and I'm pregnant with my 5th child, and we have paperwork, underway for our 6th child because we adopted our last 2 children that we were blessed to have. And she says to me, she's like, oh, this is really hard. And I'm like, do not say that. I'm like, no, this is really wonderful. And yes, there's work involved. But I think when you're doing work and you're getting to see results and you're getting to see progress and you're solving problems and you feel like the world's a little bit better, then you can enjoy your work. And I think that that's a lot, and that's a learned behavior. You tell a 14-year-old to take the garbage out and he'll be like, it's so hard, I have to get it out of the thing and carry it down the steps and open the door. I'm like, you just spent more mental energy imagining the difficulties that you will face on your quest than you would have spent just getting the quest done, right? So there is a lot of training that's required in our mind to be successful. And I think as a doctor who's, my goal is not to fix people's health problem, but to empower them into healthier living, a healthier mindset, a healthier body. They go together, they're inseparable, or teach my children to discover their own personal aptitudes and develop them and experience the joy that happens with that, so they don't get in dangerous identity crises that are so prevalent in this society if they're not finding the thing they were meant to do, right? So it puts me in touch with all that, and it all kind of works together for me.
I know your family well. I know all your children. They're all well accomplished. They all seem very level-headed.
They are.
And I think that's a big achievement all on its own, because you're dealing with, each child has a different personality, and different interests, and 7 children is a big family. So, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, you've had to deal with their health situations going over the years. Have you had any challenges? I don't want to get personal here, but just educating them on proper eating, on these little insults, I call them, that we do, like smoking or drinking or
so
processed
I know that,
food.
Yeah, I know that probably the bane is the Zyn, the little tobacco things. Like, I feel like some of them are involved in Zyn. But for the most part, it becomes, in the parenting world, kids learn so much more from what you're doing than what you tell them. If you tell them things, they're just going to argue with you about them, right? You have to be in the trenches doing and maybe explaining as you go along, right? You can't just try to hammer the message to them, because they're just going to go in the opposite direction. So, it's knowing things like, probably for me, my own personal, health issues, which were probably more getting the thinking right. I was very kind of prone to like depressive thought processes and everything when I was, in my 20s, very prone to those kind of things. And I really had to learn how to hold my thoughts captive and sort out what was a good productive thought And what was a thought that was just going to take me into a repetitive cycle of misery? Like, I had to figure that out. And I think because of my own personal experience in that, and I realized in the mental health world, you know, I think that it's time to advance. We've been telling people that they have anxiety, they have depression, it's a disorder, they have, you know, whatever disorder we come up with. People are taking that noun and that condition and incorporating into their identities, and it's terrible. You know, I think it would be a world better. It certainly was better for me. It's certainly been better as I've coached my kids through their own rabbit holes of thinking, of that you don't have depression, you're struggling with depressive thoughts. And if we don't find a way to help you win in your struggle, those depressive thoughts are going to get all consuming, and it's going to interfere with your capacity to enjoy things. It's going to interfere with your capacity to do it, you know. So when it comes to anxious or depressing thoughts or addictions and stuff like that, you know, the thing is nobody's an addict, but there are people who are addicted to substance, who are actively engaged in addictive substances, right? And I think if we just stayed on the verb there, you know, and it's interesting because the whole health payment system conspires to stick people with a diagnosis.
Exactly, and I think that happens a lot, according to the number of people I see that are on some type of mood altering medication, you know, like Prozac, for example. It's commonplace. And you know, what does that do? That may be necessary for a while, I don't know, but it's not looking at the underlying cause. So we need to approach medicine looking for that root cause.
Well, and I think the thing is, you know, and when you look at this, and I said it's almost like the health system is conspiring, and this is why. If I'm struggling with anger thoughts, and I think, wow, I'm gonna mess my life up if I don't get this under control, like my wife's gonna leave me, or I'm gonna get fired at my job because I'm just having outbursts, right? Well, if I gotta go to a mental health counselor and she's gonna want to bill for it, she gotta say I have bipolar disorder.
You have to have a code to get
right?
to do the billing.
She has to have a code to get paid to see me. She can't just say, listen, this guy has never really learned to properly manage frustrations and anger, and it is ballooning into something bigger and bigger that, yeah, will eventually disease his life if we don't get it under control. But right now, and so, and then there's the pharmaceutical piece of it, is as soon as she says, well, he's got bipolar disorder, there's an obligation that she has to treat that. And the obligation is that she has to use a medicine, right? Whereas if we said that the problem is not successfully and habitually not successfully managing anger, right? Then we would say, well, what are the different ways that one manages anger, right? And there are times when the train is so far off the track, and I try to use things like Prozac or, you know, those type of medicines. I try to use them more like I use a cast to fix an arm. That if you've been in such a cycle of repeatedly having depressive thoughts, those medications may have some advantage in interrupting that. But I don't think you have depression and you're never going to get better and you've always had this, and because your parents didn't socially manage their depression well, so they weren't able to teach you to manage yours well. I don't think you have depression. Genetically what you have, because people who suffer from depression tend to be a little bit more intellectual, is you have a lot of smarts and you have a lot of brain things going on. If you don't learn how to organize them, by default, they'll go into depression. But if you learn how to organize them, you're going to be able to do incredible, amazing things with your depression. So I don't like our medical model, how they slap you with this diagnosis, which internalizes into people's identity and even maybe internalizes into their heritage, and then they're stuck with the problem. I like to approach to the problem as you're having this issue, this particular thought process that's going off the rails for you, that's causing you problems, and let's look how we treat this thing and maybe some other things that go along with it. But I don't like to label anybody, but and I would love to see the payment system move from paying for diagnosis to paying for a plan that helps somebody be successful. Because then you don't have to wait until somebody is full-blown suicidally depressed to treat them. It's just when somebody starts to have a pervasive thought that, I don't know if I can do this. I'm not doing well in my studies, or I, got some cyberbullying and it's kind of damaged my self-image, and I don't know how to get out of thinking I'm not a good person or I'm not a capable person. Like, those are the people I would like to treat the most, because you can get them totally better quickly. But if that goes on and they think that way for years and years, it becomes entrenched and it becomes a lot more difficult to help somebody into enjoyable living.
Yeah, and that model is going from sick care to health care. Mm-hmm. Really, when you think about it, we're really in a sick care model.
Yeah, we are.
And we need to go to a preventative, proactive health care model. But how does the media reinforce all of that?
So whether you talk social media,
it doesn't matter. I think they're all
intertwined.
Social
media. Yeah. You and I are more from the TV generation and stuff like that. Oh yeah, it absolutely propagates it. And you've got the entertainment industry. You've got all these things where I know ADHD is a very popular one. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
And what is that?
Well, what do I think it is versus what does the medical community say it is?
Exactly.
Right? The medical community says it's a disease, and it's, a kid can't sit still in a chair, or an adult can't finish a task.
I always thought you caught a disease. You got the flu. That's catching.
Well, you can catch ADHD from your friends.
You can?
Yeah, you can. You can catch depression from your family. And you can catch anxiety from your coworkers. I mean,
if you let them get in your head.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely psychological phenomenon functions exactly like a virus. It spreads person to person. Only you don't have to be in the same room. It can spread right over, the phone screen or across the text, right? So definitely these things are contagious. In my mind, what the attention issue isn't it a problem with attention? It's a problem that should be a gift, right? You've got this powerful mind that's able to track on multiple thought processes and be all over the place and be high energy. And what's the problem? The only problem is that, for a 6-year-old that has an extremely active mind, if you don't give them proper tools to manage it and organize it, it's going to be all over the place. Our mental energy is exactly like a fire. If you do the right thing with the fire, you put it in a nice fireplace or a contained oven, you can cook food with it, you can warm the house with it, right? You can drive the car down the road by putting it in a combustion. Fire's great. But if it's disorganized and it's all over the place, it's going to burn the house down. It's going to hurt people. It's going to kill people, right? So our personal energies are something that need tended carefully, paid attention to. And it all starts with the thoughts and the words we use, because the thoughts and the words that we use in our self-talk and in our speech to others start to evoke feelings, right? And back to the media, what does the media like to do? It likes to evoke fear and anger, because if you're fearful or angry, you're going to remember stuff. You're going to be drawn back into it. So the media has its own self-preserving interest in getting you hyped up. And the media has its own interest in potentially making you feel inadequate and insecure instead of being delighted with, imagine if 90% of the people who have been diagnosed with ADHD suddenly realized that they're actually wonderfully and brilliantly made, and they have some talents in that superactive mind, right? In that mind that's easily distractible, to attend to multiple things. I have a guy in my practice, he has learned how to use the gift, and he harnesses all of the sound production for major events like March Madnesses, Olympic events and stuff like that, because he can go from one thing to the next thing to the next thing to the next thing. And he's learned to surround in his company himself with people as he doesn't have to finish a thought process. People with, who have been burdened with this, like we'll say, I can't finish anything. You don't have to, right? He has structured in such a way, his job is to think of what's next and hand it off to somebody. So he doesn't actually have to complete a process, which is great because he has a mind that thinks a lot, that gets distracted by the next thing, and he's organized his life in such a way where it's made him profoundly successful. So I would tell people again and again, nothing's wrong with the way that your brain was created. It was created wonderfully. We just have to figure out, how are you going to be successful with the brain that you've got, right? How are you going to find something that you're good at that is going to be very fulfilling to you and takes an account for your own unique way of thinking? And the first thing we have to do is get rid of garbage thoughts that are cluttering it up.
And I think the media does a good job of implanting that in your brain.
Yeah.
You know, and
because it wants to be the expert.
Well, there's always a dollar assigned to that somewhere along the line. You know, it's
somewhere somebody's making money from
making
it,
money,
right?
and so you know, you really got to be careful on what you're watching and what you're listening to, basically.
Right, and you have to learn how to evaluate the quality of it. You know, and we have standards. So from ancient times, like we have texts that are 2,000 or 3,000 years old. Like we have The Art of War, for example, right? It's a little Chinese pamphlet. You know, I don't know if you've ever read The Art of War. My son just read it. You know, and it was basically for Chinese generals. But it turns out it's pretty, you know, when it comes to like negotiating things at work, or if you're having trouble with, you know, somebody throwing you under the bus, you know, in school, the Art of War is actually kind of a nifty little thing to read, right? You know, a lot of the Proverbs and in the Book of Wisdom and stuff like that are actually guidances on how you capture feelings of depression and despair and the thoughts that go with them and manage them. So, and it would seem that the societies that have had the most time, you know, like the Chinese and like Western Judeo-Christian societies, had pamphlets, models. How do we deal with troublesome thoughts? How do we deal with conflict in a healthy, productive way? And, you know, if you look at, you know, big scopes of works, like something like the Bible that's very encompassing, it has everything about what goes wrong when you do it wrong and what a disaster that makes, and what it goes amazingly right when you've got, you know, a hold of your thoughts and you've got them organized.
Everything you think, everything you say, everything you do has a consequence.
Yeah.
And I think if you don't look at that consequence before you think, say, or do, you get yourself into trouble.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, or if you train yourself well enough, usually, you know, there's certain good habits, just like a bad habit, you can automatically light up a cigarette. You know, I used to smoke, it's a terrible thing, but, right, it becomes an automatic behavior. But your good decisions can become just as automatic, and that's what it was designed for, right? It was not designed to have us repeatedly do the same wrong thing that's harmful to our body and other people. We were actually designed to repeatedly do things that are beneficial to ourselves and the people around us. And if we can tap into that design, yeah, we have healthier, happy lives for sure.
So what's the trick to tap into it?
Well, that's such a good question. It's the mystery. It's the mystery of, like, oh, who knows if we would get this profound today? Right? I believe it's one, just being aware of certain truths, right? Of really buying in to things that are productive as who we are and what we can be. The first thing is I think the ability to recognize the difference between what's a lie and what's true, right? The ability to say, wait a minute, this isn't a true thought. This is just a depressive thought that's going to make me stay in bed today. It's just a lie because some part of me is disordered and doesn't believe I could get out of bed and like have a good day, right? This is a lie. I've got to kick this thought out, right? Or, you know, this fear that I caught from the conversation I had with my cousin, is that really a realistic fear? You know, I think a lot of it is, yeah, just the first thing we have to do is figure out what is reality, what's true, and what's a lie. And if we know that difference, then we can. And it becomes critical to our own body's survival. You know, we've talked before about hormones. You know, yeah, if your anxiety is out of control, your adrenaline and your cortisone are going to start to cause your immune system to dysfunction, and then you're going to get sicker from the environmental viruses that you encounter.
So hormones do play a big have an impact. Cortisol, insulin, your thyroid hormone.
Yeah.
They all influence. They're basically messengers.
Right.
So they send these messages to the receptor sites, and they either become aggravated or not aggravated. And then we can do things that even like jumpstart those. Caffeine is one, and I think a little caffeine is fine. If you overdo it on caffeine, you may have a problem.
Well, that's that moderation balance.
Yeah, and that's something you have to acquire. But there's such things. We know sugar is very disruptive to our system because it throws those hormones off balance.
Yeah.
And becomes addictive as well. So you keep increasing more and more because your body requires, just like the same receptor sites as cocaine, I think we mentioned earlier in the first segment. And then there's such things as MSG, which is a natural, can't even be organic, but it's neurotoxin, an excitatory toxin. And if you overdo an MSG, you cause those receptor sites to be disrupted and actually explode and die. So there's a lot of things that we can do, that we are doing on a daily basis that can help throw us into this situation.
Right, right. Well, I think the thing is the fundamental question comes, how can I feel better? How can I be healthier? And in the moment, sometimes that's a thing that you can, improve your relationship with somebody is a way to feel better, right? Improve your exercise regimen is a way that you can feel physically and mentally better. So when it comes to the mind-body connection, if you don't know what to do to feel better, as long as you, one, believe that it's possible for you to feel better, which is the first step, then you have a whole array of choices that can unfold before you, and you can just pick the one you like best. So, if you don't know how to get the gunk out of your head, you can start saying, well, I'm going to exercise, right? So I think the first thing is to recognize the possibility that you could feel better. And then, whether you address it by knowing something that you already know is wrong in your diet, or you already know is wrong in your habit, that is. And if you're seeking professional help, again, that caution, I think that, when we look at our increased rate of suicide, one of the things that I think sadly impacts it is people will go to get help, and they're going to be getting help from a very well-meaning counselor. But then when that counselor tells them they have depression, they're like, I don't want to have depression. And then if the media and their life experiences told them depression is a permanent condition, they may get to the point where they say, I don't want to live like this.
That's depressing all by itself.
Right? I don't want to live like this. Whereas if they went to get that help and somebody said to them, well, it seems, sir, that the amount of time that your brain spends on thinking depressive things is just gotten to be too much for you, and we have to find a way to reduce that. And if you feel too tangled up to tackle the thought processes, if you were having a lot of alcohol or a lot of sweets in your diet, maybe let's pull back on those for a minute, right?
So you have to admit that there's a problem before you ever can receive the help, because if you don't see there's a problem, nobody can force the help on you.
Right.
All right. How does sleep impact all of this?
Well, sleep is the time for the mind to rest. I have decided that I enjoy the level of health that I have. Not everybody my age gets to enjoy really good health, but what I notice is that sleep is such a powerful, my sleep is very efficient. I may wake up once or twice a night. I have an easy time falling asleep. If something's weighing on my mind, maybe a little bit more different. If I have a drink of alcohol after dinner, it's guaranteed going to disrupt my sleep, right? But when I was stressed out in my 20s and everything stressed me, my sleep was awful. You know, so even if I tried to get on a good sleep regimen, which was not always the thing that you're trying to do when you're 23, right? Even when I tried to, I couldn't sleep right. Even if I fell asleep, it wasn't deep, restful sleep, and I'd wake up with nightmares and all these other crazy things. And this is what happens to people when they're not feeling well. I think is a great marker of health and something that is restorative sleep. And you know, exercise.
And that's the key, the restorative sleep.
Exercise does help you get restorative sleep.
You need to get in that REM sleep and that deep sleep.
Yeah, and I notice when I'm on my regular exercise regimen, you know, that sleep is deeper sleep. And then the REM sleep that I have is usually an enjoyable dream, which is kind of fun. Maybe a little wacky kind of dream, but I'm like, oh, that's interesting. It's because one of the things that you don't even have to reorganize your whole brain. If you're on a thought of starting to identify garbage thoughts and import good thoughts, they'll rearrange them while you're sleeping. So some of those kooky dreams that we have are actually rearranging the thoughts in our head, and if we're on a good path, they're going to rearrange them in a good way for us. So you don't even have to do the work all by yourself. Your body was actually, and your mind, was designed with the power of healing contained within it.
And you only heal when you sleep. When you're awake and your body's functioning, it's all that energy is going to for digestion, for pumping your heart heavy, for delivering that oxygen, whatever it is. But when you sleep, you kind of go in a state of semi-hibernation.
Yeah.
And that's the time that your cells regenerate.
Yeah, that's a healing time.
Unless you have disruptive sleep. And then you're not going to
Then you don't get the best healing from the day's damage and the day's tolls.
And that influences your mental capability for the following day.
And influences your physical capability.
Exactly. It's amazing how all of this is a big circle.
It's all connected together. It's like an extremely well-designed machine. But yeah, if you pull a cog out of the machine, it could potentially wreck the whole machine.
It's incredible. So we're here with Dr. Rebecca Plute from Paragon Personal Healthcare, and we're really talking about a lifestyle. That's what we're talking about, how to improve your lifestyle, because you improve your lifestyle, you're going to improve your health. You're going to improve your health, you're going to improve your wellness, and ultimately your happiness. And I would say a little step further, your longevity. We all want to live long, but we want to live healthy, happy lives. And one of the things that interrupts all of that is, I think, your mindset, first of all. If you wake up and say it's going to be a bad day, I guarantee you're going to have a bad day.
Yeah, you're going to be right.
Yeah, And if you wake up and say, okay, it's going to be a good day. I always like when the sun shines. Kind of a problem here in western Pennsylvania, not as much sun. But you can't change that, so just accept it and go forward. Hey, we're at our last break. We'll be back for I think it's the fourth part of our show already.
Oh, wow.
Goes by fast, Dr. Plute. We'll be back on the Dr. Ed Show.